Right now, the Leon County School Board is meeting and it's weighing some major budget cuts for the next school year. Some of the biggest proposed cuts include 17 school social workers, which would cut the district-wide number from 27 to 10. This was previously paid for by COVID-era funding. It also funded 24 interventionists. LCS is suggesting staffing just one of those per school. Besides staffing, this also looks at arts and athletics funding by 50%, meaning either some program cuts or higher fees for families. Another big cut would be Leon virtual schools. Instead, students would have to enroll directly into the state virtual school. Superintendent Rocky Hanna says there is only so much talk that can happen before they start making tough decisions.
But at some point, the school board members are going to have to step up and make some tough decisions. I've said this a number of times now. These are not about efficiencies, how we become more efficient. These are a list of cuts that we would not make otherwise from not having money from the state to fund these programs and these positions.
Hanna says they anticipate reduced revenue from the state and federal government, and these cuts would put them ahead of that. Altogether, the proposed cuts total about $7 million.